My name is Mary Ann Christie. I am a high school history teacher in Seattle, Washington. And today I would like to tell you how robust discussion of controversial issues made my classroom a more joyful place. Those of you who teach any kind of history probably know that sometimes controversial issues can make your classroom chaos. But I'm here to tell you that, in fact, robust discussion can really bring joy. And so that's what I'm going to tell you about. So let me start first with my own experience with dealing with controversial issues and discussions. As a young kid in Denver, Colorado, I wanted to be a lawyer more than anything. And here's a picture of me in the 1970s on the steps of the Supreme Court building in Washington, D.C., where I visited with my family. And I wanted to be the first woman Supreme Court justice. You'll know that this is the 1970s, before Sandra Day O'Connor became the first woman Supreme Court justice by my bell bottoms. But I also gave it up, not just because of Sandra Day O'Connor, but because when I got to high school, I learned that debating and arguing when you have a sort of an aggressive edge, as I did, didn't make you very popular. So I sort of dropped my dreams of becoming a lawyer and kind of tried to avoid controversial issues as much as I could. Of course, I couldn't avoid them at home, where my parents had a very different political bent than my own. And so we had a lot of arguments about politics, and the discussions about controversial issues did not bring joy. There was crying and yelling and a lot of anxiety. And I tried to do better, but when I moved from Denver to the East Coast, there was even more controversial issues to be discussed. And eventually, as an adult, I kind of learned how to have these discussions without raised blood pressure or shouting or crying. And what I want is for my students to have that too. I think, especially in today's atmosphere, it's really important for students to know how to talk about controversies without screaming or yelling or crying or getting mad. So when I became a teacher, I first learned about ways of bringing good deliberation and discussion into the classroom from Walter Parker at the University of Washington School of Education. He taught me about this method introduced by David and Roger Johnson called structured academic controversy. Here's a paper of theirs from 1988. And I also learned about all sorts of other kinds of deliberation and discussion in the classroom. So when I started teaching high school, I plunged right in. I had big debates where I would split the class in half, and it was Las Casas versus Sepulveda, and it was chaos, and there were bad feelings, and there were good feelings too, right? That's students always come in saying, when are we going to debate? At least the ones who want to be aggressive and feel like they can win. And then the people who are anxious and timid feel terrible about it. And so there's joy for some students, but a big debate like that, or even a one-on-one debate like that, can really not bring joy to the classroom. I tried to do it with 4 groups, like a 4-way debate, and that works because there are more sort of points of view out there, but the listening is hard, and unless you've practiced with something like structured academic controversy, there's just no joy. So let's talk a little bit about structured academic controversy, because it's my husband calls it my superpower, since he agrees with me that my main job is to get students to talk about difficult issues in a peaceful way that leads to consensus building. We all want that, I think. So structured academic controversy starts with a good topic. And some good topics that I've experienced start with issues that students have ideas about, but haven't yet formed opinions. So for instance, I have a debate about whether individualism is better or community. And they may not really know what they think about that. They may not even know what those ideas mean, but that's a good question to have a debate about. Or even something like minimum wage, where they don't know what they think yet, but they do have some ideas. A structured academic controversy is a great way to get kids to learn about something like that and come up with their own opinions. Another category of good questions are questions where students have opinions, but they aren't really able to say why they have those opinions. So the death penalty, for instance, is one that I've had success with before. Tough question, and kids have strong opinions, but they don't have good reasoning necessarily or facts to back it up. In structured academic controversy, you give them facts so they can kind of grapple with them and come up with opinions. You do, however, want to start with a good question, a question that is clear, first of all, and second of all, isn't something that you wouldn't want to hear students arguing about. So for instance, I would never give students a structured academic controversy on the question, is slavery acceptable? Because it just isn't, and I never want to hear children making up arguments about why it is, even if there were people in history who said it was. So I never want to hear that, so I would never have that structured academic controversy. And that's kind of a good guiding way of thinking about questions. Also, there are lots of questions out there on the internet. The Stanford History Education Group, or SHEG as we call them, has a ton of them. And Street Law, I learned this summer, has a Deliberating in a Democracy series that has lots of good structured academic controversy questions with background information and all the things you need to run one. So those are places to start as well. So how do they work? First, you need to come up with a question, and then you're going to prepare readings for both sides. You'll give them sort of both have general information about the topic, and then break down facts and do the research yourself so that you know they have good facts, one for each side. You can give it for homework. I often don't, though. Usually I try to fit this all into a 45-minute class, and it's successful 100% of the time. When I come in, I split the room in half. One side will do one side of the issue, and the other side will do the other. I hand out the readings, and then as they're reading and preparing with a graphic organizer that allows them to take notes and decide which of the arguments they think is strongest, I'm at the board making pairs. So I look at the people on this side, okay, you and you are going to work together, and then you and you are going to work together while they're reading. Then once I've made all the pairs, I match the pairs up. So you two over here are going to be with you two over there. And after they've had about 15 minutes to read and work with their partner, they come together in this foursome. Two will be on one side, two on the other, and they have to sit knee to knee, better than around the corner of a table or something like that, because then they really are looking at each other and listening. Then the structured academic controversy begins, and I sit in the middle with my timer going, and I say yes side is going to go first, and the yes side presents for 2 minutes. I tell them in advance both sides have to talk. This formula for making a structured academic debate allows for both sides to talk because they're kind of safe. It's only 2 people, and if you give them a reminder about a minute in, the dominating person who's been talking the whole time will be reminded to let the other person talk as well. So I let the yes side talk for 2 minutes. The no side listens while they're talking and takes notes on that same graphic organizer on the other side. And then they have a minute to tell back to the yes side exactly what it was that they heard. Yes listens and corrects anything they got wrong and confirms it when they got it right, and then they switch sides. The no side presents for 2 minutes. The yes side listens and takes notes, and the yes side tells what they heard for a minute, with the no side then correcting and confirming what they heard. Then you let them drop their sides and try to find consensus. This is the part that brings the joy, because now they all have the same facts. No one's been yelling at each other. They've both known that their arguments have been heard, and they don't have to take a side they don't agree with anymore. And they talk about it, and you can tell them the goal is to find consensus, but you don't have to. And if you don't find consensus, let us know why you didn't. And then you want to take that time to make sure the class comes back together to discuss what the consensus was that different groups came to, and what got in the way of consensus. And this is the discussion that's really worth it. And this is where the joy comes in. So your students, instead of leaving class feeling anxious and sad or overly energized, they leave feeling terrific because they've come to an opinion of their own, using facts. Nobody's been yelling at anyone else, and it's fantastic. And here's sort of why. You've given them a safe space for exploring these controversial issues. You've forced them and facilitated listening, which we all know is hard, and this makes them do it. It allows for consensus building, so it lets them kind of give a little bit and get a little bit in order to figure things out, but it doesn't mean they have to come to consensus. It's okay if students leave not agreeing with each other because they've just listened to each other and everybody knows it. So this is why structured academic controversy brings joy to my classroom, and I hope that you will bring it into your classroom and give yourself some joy too.